And we keep things rolling on this super special championship edition of the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. I'm here with the marvelous one, Dan Marver, and a team that is nowhere near getting to a championship, being on a championship Sunday, having good vibes, is the Chicago Bulls, especially after this week's NBA trade deadline. This season's NBA trade deadline has come and gone. We're going to get into all that in just a little bit. And some teams that are a step closer to possibly NBA championship glory, the LA Lakers, the Dallas Mavericks, the Golden State Warriors. So we have talked a little bit, especially here on the YouTube channel over at the Sports Cubicle, about Zach LaVine being moved and now joining forces with DeMar DeRozan once again, and Nikola Vucevic staying here in Chicago. Before we get into that, let's go to Marver and let's talk about what happened with Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis. This is my thesis, Marver, on almost anything that happens in the NBA, and if you want to correlate it to the Chicago Bulls. Good teams, smart front offices put themselves in positions when there's disgruntled superstars or superstars that are about to make a lot of money, that they put themselves in the proper place that they can make a bid for that superstar player. Because unless you draft a special player, the only way to win in the NBA is trying to gather that disgruntled star, aka Anthony Edwards one day. What have the Chicago Bulls ever done, whether it's the Garpax era and now the Mark Eversley, Arturas Karnisovas era, where you have thought to them, you have thought to yourself, yes, they are going to land that big fish when that time comes. And you saw the LA Lakers do that with Luka Doncic. And you can make the argument, if you're the Dallas Mavericks, you did that with Anthony Davis. Heck, if you're a Golden State Warriors fan, signing that extension with Jimmy Butler, you might have done the same thing, gotten yourself that much closer to a superstar. What were your thoughts initially about league-wide, the big trades with Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis, Jimmy Butler, and then we'll correlate in and we'll jump back to the west side of Chicago. But let's go. What did you think about the big trades in the NBA?
Well, a lot of it, and one thing you mentioned was money. And I think money is definitely a factor a lot of times in these trades. In the case of Luka, with the max contract and everything, and he's 25, so it's and he is a little injury prone, and he has some other issues that may or may not be true, drinking and others. But I don't know. It seemed like a good trade for LA because Doncic is younger, and and I think that it was a big surprise. I was surprised to everybody, including LeBron. Apparently, you'd think he would have been consulted, so that's another surprise. I thought he was the assistant general manager of and may help make decisions. But in any event, past the LeBron, he's 40. Past the LeBron era, they should be looking towards the future, and in doing so, I think that's what that deal was all about. And as surprising as it was. And in terms of Golden State, I mean, here was a case where Butler had more than wore out his welcome. And in Miami, he was suspended and he wasn't coming to practices and whatnot. So, I think that he wrote his own ticket out of town. And Golden State was fortunate to get him to develop, another potential championship team, although they're way down in the standings. So this will definitely help them. They're in Chicago. They were in Chicago actually Saturday night for their first game with Butler, and they look like they've got the pieces together to make a run. You never with Steph, you never know. He can shoot from the locker room, so anything's possible. So you're looking at those teams making a move, and the Bulls. It was interesting to me. The most interesting thing about the Bulls was Billy Donovan. He was talking about going forward, and he's already talking about the draft and free agency. It's like this year is history. It sounds like the way he's talking. They did get some bodies. They got another Zach and Collins and Herter and et cetera. But it's not going to help them improve their team. They may not even make the play-in this year. So they may maybe they're hoping to be in the sweepstakes. They're going to have a top 10 pick for sure after the Sacramento trade, but they're hoping to maybe go even higher by playing even lower. And that's what it looks like to me almost. Even the coach sort of admitted that, saying, with his comments about, you know, he talked more about the free agency and the draft than he did about the trade. So again, maybe a salary dump, maybe, it doesn't seem to have any correlation to a rebuild, honestly, because they're going to play more Bezelis and they're going to take what they've got, but they lost almost 30 points a game, so that's irreplaceable. And in terms of like I say, going forward this season, I don't think they'll make the play-in now. And Golden State, LA have helped themselves. I'm not so sure Dallas has helped themselves, honestly, but we'll see what happens. And Dallas got to the finals last year, and I don't think they're going to now.
It's going to be really interesting league wide how all these teams like that you have Denver staying put and Phoenix staying put, and names like Bradley Beal didn't get moved. So there's a lot of intrigue in how the playoffs are going to play out, because in the Western Conference, it is up in the air. Like, how sure is anybody that OKC is really going to go on an NBA Finals run? They might be one of the favorites, but again, you could see the Lakers, you could see Denver, you could see a lot of teams making a run. And then in the Eastern Conferences, can anybody get through Boston? Can anybody get through Cleveland? So there's some intrigue, and I think Miami helped themselves when it comes to maybe big picture. Their team might be a little bit better. The way it's set up defensively, they're going to be a real nightmare defensively in the Eastern Conference. But why don't we move a little bit to Chicago? Because I think you're seeing a lot of teams try to put themselves in positions to win. This is something that we've talked about here on the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, with the marvelous one, Dan Marver. We just took a look at all the big time trades in the NBA and how teams are putting themselves in positions or trying to convince themselves that they're in certain positions for the future and for the now. That's not the same for the Chicago Bulls. We have Arturas Karnisovas come out and speak to the media, and it would make sense if in today's NBA, where people are just getting rid of number one picks for superstars to try to win now. But if you look at, since the Bulls have moved on from DeMar DeRozan and traded Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso, this is what they've gotten back. Josh Giddey, Kevin Huerter, Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Chris Duarte, 2 second-round picks, and the rights to their own 2025 first-round picks. No additional ones. And this has to come to with lack of foresight and what I believe is stubbornness that has plagued a Bulls front office for different regimes of wanting to move on and holding on to your pet projects. We just saw Lonzo Ball get an extension. They didn't move on and make a decision on Isle or Kobe White. And now you're stuck in a position where you have your general manager saying this to reporters. If in the next 30 games, we're going to be out of the play-in and out of playoffs, we'll get a good pick. But at the same time, if we, with this young team, can make the play-in and playoffs, it's going to be an accomplishment. If your young guys developing translates into wins, I think that's growth. Which is it? Which is it, Marver? So you want to develop your team and you want to bring in young talents. The way to do that is by playing, losing, and getting good draft picks. Because in the NBA, it's not the NFL or NHL or heck, even in Major League Baseball, where you got a goalie that stands on his head, or a bullpen that's just been lights out, or the NFL where a 7th seed in the wild card can make a run to the Super Bowl. It's pretty obvious who the favorites are in the NBA. And the Chicago Bulls are nowhere near getting a good draft pick for a superstar that's in a very deep NBA draft coming up, or getting the disgruntled superstar around the league. What did you think about how AK has handled this, Michael Reinsdorf has handled this, and the future of the Chicago Bulls post-2025 trade deadline?
Actually, I'd like to hear a concrete explanation of the plan because I don't believe that we've had one. It's still up in the air what the plan is, how they're going to do the rebuild, because it's a work in progress with the way they're explaining it. Obviously they're hoping to get a draft pick and free agents. It sounds like the answer to the rebuild, and that's a reasonable approach. But we can't see that today. We don't know exactly what the team's going to look like in the future. This current team, as I stated before, is a clear sub 500, possibly below number 11 seed team, and so they'll do well in the draft. Now, making free agents appealing to them is another interesting question, because over the years it doesn't seem like they've been too successful in attracting free agents to the Bulls. I mean, after all, what are you gonna make? Are you gonna say there's a rebuild and maybe someday we'll be a championship contender? Because the free agents want to be with championship contenders immediately, and they're not going to see that with the Bulls because A, it's obvious that they're not, and B, there doesn't seem to be a plan to get there yet.
And it's the frustrating part of it because in today's NBA, you can scout and recruit any star player unless it's the guy like LeBron to come anywhere in any type of scenario where as long as they believe in the organization and they believe there's a direction, they'll go there. Giannis Antetokounmpo is more than okay staying in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's a different day and age because you can become popular. You can have a brand anywhere in the world. But the Chicago Bulls, to your credit, just bringing it up, have never been able to seal the deal when it comes to recruiting a big-time free agent, from Tracy McGrady all the way to LeBron James. It has never happened, and it won't happen because they don't know what players value in the league nowadays. And you heard it again. Arturas Karnisovas in the same press conference saying a team filled with 10, 11, 12 good players is just as capable of winning an NBA title than a team with 2 or 3 superstars. When has that ever happened? And people want to cite the 04 Pistons. You're telling me Rip Hamilton, Chauncey Billups, and Rashad Wallace and Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, weren't superstars in their time? Yeah, that's my point. It's time is a flat circle with this organization, Marver. Marvelous. And final thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us.
I want to know, was Bill Laimbeer on that team?
Oh my God. And then you look at that team themselves, right? It's like, oh, it was a great team. Yeah, they just had one of the greatest point guards of all time, huh? Yeah, right. Be interesting how that happens. Marver, any final thoughts, buddy, as we let you go on this super championship edition of the Sports?
Yeah. And it's like we pretty much covered the situation with the Bulls. I mean, if I'm a Bulls fan and a Bulls ticket holder, I feel like, okay, we got 3 bodies for Levine, and so what happens next? We don't know what happens next because there is no stated plan of what's going to happen other than free agents and draft picks, and that's not going to be known until April and beyond. So this year, it sounds like, is in the dumpster, which is really sad.
And it's going to be a continuous thing, but it'd be nice just to know that they had a plan that wasn't just prayer and hope. We want to know your thoughts. Let us know. We're on Twitter at Mike and Media. Of course, check us out on the YouTube at The Sports Cubicle. We have a jam-packed edition still on this super championship edition of the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. He's the marvelous one, Dan Marver. We're here on WCPT 820 and WSBC 1240 AM, Chicago.